right. I think the left wing and the right wing, the difference is, I would say for me, is I'm not even trying to tell these people like, oh, you should just be nice and you should just have my belief systems. No, I'll skip all that. So you can be as much of an a-hole as you want. You can believe any nonsense you want to believe. That's fine. But why don't you come to the table and talk to people, where the left says, no, we can't even talk to people. We're scared of like a diversity of thought. I think that's a huge difference. Can you insult the customer and profit? The Joe Glass story. Okay, Joe Glass doesn't believe in grizzly bears, but grizzly bears definitely believe in Joe Glass. They're spurging out on Twitter about the term customer service and a bunch of nonsense, deck chairs, Titanic type of stuff. And if comics needs to worry about it, and they're arguing. It's funny, people go on Twitter and they argue about the smallest stuff that really don't have long-term consequences, and they just bypass the elephant in the room. But they argue insanely passionately about all these things that don't really matter. It's like, you just spent 90 minutes of your Tuesday on Twitter arguing about something that doesn't matter. That's not a good use of your time. Any other use of your time would have been better than that. They're arguing about the specific definitions of things, because SJWs have a problem with the concept of customer service, because they don't human well. Once you pierce the echo chamber with a diversity of thought, it's like they seize up in panic and they just lash out instead of saying, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll agree to disagree. What the argument comes down to is, can I treat the customer like garbage and still get paid? They're arguing the letter of the law and not the spirit, which is, if you're not respectful to the customer, by whatever definition of the word customer means, the end user, the source of the money. Yes, an artist is working for Marvel and they pay him, and then it goes to the retailer, and then the books go to the customer at the end. It's like, well, okay, so who's, like, let's do the equation here. Who are the important parties? The object, the product itself, the comic book, it has to be fundamentally good. But the term customer service means roughly your social media behavior. You make the product that passes through a few hands, but only the customer matters. Not a fan, not a sub, a customer. Those are all slightly different definitions. Because, follow my logic here, you can bypass Marvel, you can bypass even the retail stores, and you can still get the product to the customer. It might take a little bit more effort, but that proves who the important parties are in that equation: the customer and the artist, the buyer and the seller, in a simple contract, a product in exchange for money. To argue over this is deck chairs on the Titanic. Here's the thing. I had an exchange with Joe Glass in his comment section. I think he later deleted it. Where it, like, a little gentle teasing. The best way to respond to teasing or people giving you S is just ignore it. Don't lash out, because you don't know their intention in comment sections, or you don't know, are they being funny? You don't know the tone. You don't know them. I mean, don't lash out if you're in the business of sales. Just kind of like let it roll off your back for a while, a few months of exchanges until you get to know the ground rules in the situation. And then if the person is still serious, it's like, okay, then you can say something. But like right off the bat, just let it flow off you. And just ignore it, because those words aren't hurting you. And the thing is, you may not be understanding the intent behind those words. He's talking about comics. In this exchange I had with him, he was talking about EVS and Comicsgate making his life a living hell, all this kind of stuff. And he's got it built up in his head, like, yeah, are there dicks in Comicsgate? Of course, of course. But there are probably more people who would like to see Joe Glass be a winner. They'd like to see Joe Glass have his pride made into a movie, and him be happy and just be like, live life without every chip on his shoulder. I mean, I'm seeing, like, you probably have more support. I don't think there's a huge BLT audience in CG, so I don't mean support like that, but at least like pass your name around. Like, you didn't have to go down this path where you're begging for sales. There's a lot of different paths where if you just let insults slide off you until you really understood the intent of them. Okay, an issue is SJWs don't human well. They don't understand the importance of social media. These aren't the old days where you had a blog in a tiny corner of the internet, like 100 people read, and the media doesn't even know about. You say something stupid on Twitter, it spreads. Somebody makes a YouTube video, so then it bounces around to Facebook, and then it goes to Gab, and then it bounces to BitChute, and then it goes back to Twitter, and your sales go up or down in response. And the thing is, a lot of these people don't consider the social media that they're not on as important. They look at like Gab and BitChute and Odysee as like, oh, that's the dexterous right wing. No, yes, some, but not all. So it doesn't matter what platform has it. It passes around, and then it eventually comes back to the customer or the potential customer and gets you a sale or takes away a sale. Twitter is not your private therapist. You have to at least pretend to be an adult on Twitter. If your Twitter is far left, you're going to, and you thought I was going to say, get a far left audience. No, it's easier to push people away than to bring people in. Anyone who has a social media account knows that. You may or may not get a far left audience, but you will push away the right wing audience. Now, some people are such big sellers, it doesn't matter. But if you're not a big seller, if, for example, you're Joe Glass, who's got 6,000 followers and he's been on Twitter for years, like I can be funny on Twitter and get 6,000 followers in a couple years, then I get kicked off, and he's begging for sales. Maybe it's time to be less of a snatch hole. You don't have to make a tweet thread, then when things don't go your way, proclaim that you're muting the thread because you got like 3 negative responses. You just mute the thread. You don't have to announce it. You look like a crazy person who needs attention. You're a 40-year-old adult. Act like an adult. Twitter is not your private playground. It is your sales showroom. And another thing for the SJW BLT crowd, everything is an audition. You are always auditioning for something. It might be for a girlfriend, it might be for a gig, it might be for a friendship. He says he wants to write for different artists and different companies because there's something, he goes to some Disney thing and says, throw money at me, I'll do it. Like, okay, well, here's the thing. All you write is BLT, furry, SJW, outrage nonsense. Yes, I read The Pride, I read your other stuff. It's all available online. On Comixology, I mean, of course. You haven't proven that you can write anything other than that. So you become typecast as the BLT writer. That's Joe Glass. He writes The Pride. Well, what else does he write? That's it. Just BLT stuff. Okay, well then, it's a very limited market. We want to see you, can you write other stuff? Well, I don't know. We haven't seen it. You haven't pushed it. So, what is or isn't customer service? Just translate that. And listen, the people on the left, they have a different facets that shine of their totality of what you'd call intelligence, and their verbal and linguistic and comprehension skills are much higher than people on the right on average. So yes, they're arguing semantics on the fine definitions of customer service. So you're winning the letter of the argument, but you're losing the spirit of the argument, where the people on the right are kind of simple and saying, just stop being dicks. Translate customer service as being a mature adult, being cool and calm. It's not an issue of the customer is right or wrong. It doesn't matter if you win these arguments. It's that you're fighting publicly on Twitter so people see how you respond and they pass that information around Facebook and YouTube. You would be much better off saying, okay, well, maybe you'll like the next product, or thanks for the feedback, or I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. To be just a very cool, calm, mature adult. A lot of these arguments, they're being purposely obdurate or obstinate, and they're arguing semantics ad infinitum. It doesn't matter if you win, if in winning you lose customers. It's like winning a fight with your significant other, but like, what's happening later that night? You get the idea. It doesn't matter if you win, if you lose customers, and you gain the support of people who don't buy comics in the first place, like that guy Ant said above. Said, oh, okay, I'll pass it along. Well, other people were saying, like, okay, Joe, I'll buy your comic if you're that desperate. You want the support of people who will put money down, not people who say, oh, I'll retweet your message. Well, okay, that's worth almost nothing. But I fought the Chads on Twitter. Why on earth would you argue with anyone on Twitter for more than one response? Just move on with your day. Go for a walk. These people have their laptop open all freaking day. Then they come back, and if they went for a walk, they would have their phone in front of them. They're like, I've got to retweet while I walk. It's like, no, dude, just go be zen. Go, everything's zen. Go, leave Twitter aside for a few days. They can easily spend hours a day on Twitter. They gain 10 customers, but then they lose 11 customers. Joe Glass and Mags are begging for money. Something is wrong, and maybe their behavior is responsible. Everyone says comics are booming. Even Joe Glass said he sold out on Amazon, which, like, what does that mean? You sold 23 copies? Is that what selling out means? But now he's begging for money. So if the industry is booming, then why aren't you booming along with them? What seems to be the problem, sir? Here's part of the deal. A lot of SJWs have brainwashed to think that they're literally fighting the Germans of the 1930s. You're not fighting them. You're fighting shitlords, or you're fighting people who just want to pull the string. They know some things are bothering you. Just ignore it. Literally, just ignore it. Mute threads, and mute people. It's partially that they think they're fighting. They're tilting at windmills, thinking they're dragons, and partially a need for dopamine, serotonin, and crowd approval by people who don't pay you. Very little of their brain power is focused on the fact that they are in a business in the first place that is very public. They own the Chads on Twitter, but they scare away the normal middle ground, or even the Chads who want to support them. But if you're a dick to somebody who looks like them, it's like you're going to look at it and go, oh, maybe this guy's not for me. And then they impress 50 far-left, furry, otherkin weirdos who don't buy comics in the first place. Comicsgate pisses them off, but it's a network that actually works. It's got a little bit less backstabbing, but, you know, Comicsgate has its fair share of backstabbing. But at least we can talk about it. The left wing can't set up YouTube channels and network because they hate each other. Like, they really hate each other. And what are they going to talk about? They own pop culture, but they can't critique it because someone is going to be a marginalized voice of marginalization, diverse, oppression, non-binary from a community of systemic. So they're literally the Austrian painter who loves dogs and just wanted what was best for his people. If they complain, and it puts them in a tight spot. And, like, they can't joke about, like, what I'm joking about. They can't joke about anything. They would just like, oh, no, you didn't. They can't criticize anything on the left that is by a BLT or a POC, or they will get called an istophobe. And that they know. Like, you got upside an honest moment, they would say, yeah, literally, you can't criticize anything. I mean, there are people on the left who are arguing, like, they wrote a letter to, I don't know, Vanity Fair or something. They all assigned a bunch of Substack creators, which I had another video. And they said, like, yeah, we need open marketplace of ideas. If we're canceling people, then you've given up communication. You've given up debate for authoritarianism. And it's like, some people on the left signed that letter. Not enough. Not enough people on the left were in support of that. They operate according to this hierarchy with trans POC at the top and English or German roughly at the bottom. And then within that, there are fine gradations, which is probably redundant use of words. But in the case of Mags versus Glass, a trans straight Italian is much higher than a super gay Englishman. And super gay is not, I don't know, referring to gay. It's a category of, like, they're super straight and they're super gay and super lesbian, I think. Trans is the flavor of the day. Gay was popular like 10 years ago. It feels old-fashioned today. Passé? I don't know. It feels old-fashioned. So Mags has social credit where Glass is a nobody. But oddly enough, I like Joe Glass a lot more than Mags, because I think Mags comes across like a grifter, a sociopath, a very, very weird person. Glass is like, he's just not as weird. He's sensitive, but he's not like as fundamentally weird as Mags. Like, Glass, I think you could kind of work with him if you just took his sensitivities into account and were careful with him, where Mags is like, Mags would destroy you on Twitter in an instant if you say, hey buddy, you're late with this thing. Oh, buddy is a male. Like, you're canceling your boss, and your other future employers are seeing this. It's like you have no awareness of your consequences, because if you can beg for $5,000 and get $5,000 in 2 days to pay expenses, then no, consequences don't exist to you. But Glass doesn't have that. He, assuming his pronouns are he, him, or he doesn't have that level of hierarchy on the hierarchy ladder. So he has to put product out there. So for him to be kind of a prima donna is like, it doesn't really make sense. Anyway, join the channel, support my vitally important work on coffee, and go check out Joe Glass's channels on YouTube. He reviews comics, does a lot of cuts. Like, Joe Glass, just stop the cuts. There's so many of these little quick cuts, and it's like your head jerks around, and he's got the pride on Comixology and Amazon. So if you're into the BLT stuff, he does a pretty good job at that. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, guys. I'll see you on the next episode.